So welcome everybody. Steve Cady here with our Change 2025 Thought Leadership online conference that we've been doing. This is our, I think now we're getting into our third year of doing this, and we've been doing lots of Nexus sessions and webinars over the years. And this one has been particularly energizing. And what we have, and for those of you that are here, if you're wondering like where recordings are, where do you get the most recent stuff and so forth, what you can see here is um, it's going to all be here in these slides, and the focus of these sessions has been really on a lot of learning, sharing, get leading edge concepts around change, thought leadership, and the notion of transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential. And we have partners here with us. We have the Schmidt-Horst College of Business, where I teach, and Shawn is a doctoral student in that program. And we have a master's program as well in organization development change, the oldest in the world. And it's a wonderful community. As we got lots of people here. Matt was a student in the program. Matt Castor here. He was here in 1902. So it's really great to have you here. You haven't aged a day since then, Matt. And so Matthew's
Too kind, too kind.
yeah, I'd love to have you in the doctoral program, Matt. It would be so much fun. And anyway, so I'm just really blessed to be teaching and doing the kinds of things that are really important in our world right now, more than ever. And Nexus for Change, which came out of some really important work with the Change Handbook, now the Collaborative Change Library, and bringing a group of people together that care about this. And as Shawn said when he came in, he goes, "Man, I feel like we're here with a bunch of friends."
Yeah.
And this is a really great group of people. It's just, the notion of birds of a feather flock together. This is kind of, we are birds of a core value and center that we all care, the things that we care about while they're being applied in all kinds of places. It's really kind of cool to see the connection that we all have and the friendships that are here. And the Academy of Management and the Organization Development Change Division has also sponsored this and been a part of this with us. And we'll be talking more about that in a little bit. And at the end, what we'll do is David Bright, who is with the ODC division and former chair and is still on the board. We'll be looking at a deep dive in the last 30 minutes of the session, a deep dive into what is organization development and change, and really picking Shawn's brain around this. And we're going to be using that to collectively bring together a foundational thematic analysis as we begin to work on how we can help contribute to the field and its foundational knowledge and frameworks and so forth. And we got lots of people, and so when you want to come in now and see some of these past sessions, you can just click on them, and the recordings are there now. So you can see all these great people that have been with us this year, and you can go, and you'll be able to also go to previous years. We've had some great people in the last year or two as well, and the topics have just been so timely and so engaging. And there's Shawn, and here's let's go back here. Where's Shawn's session? Right here. Here's Shawn's session. And what I want to say, Shawn, in introducing Shawn, he's probably one of the most big-hearted, big-thinking people that cares deeply and has a tendency to really take care of people. He's got this genuine way of just taking care of others, and it's his history. It's his history in the military, which he's a decorated veteran and has done some amazing work all around the world. And as we got to explore the concepts of his work at Raytheon around Agile, and he's a thought leader in Raytheon, and he does a lot of work on major projects at scale. And if you look up Agile at scale, it's a really important cutting edge new kind of way of thinking about Agile, which was oftentimes applied at small groups. He'll be talking to you about that. But he gets into the program and he's talking about OD&C, and he starts weaving those together and just creating some incredible connections around how do we do this work, Agile and OD&C at scale. And so I've been super impressed with the homework. He leaves no stone unturned. So you're going to get introduced to a really cool way of thinking about this, some great knowledge and resources. And he's such a generous human being please reach out to if you do have questions, because he's always welcomes talking with and connecting with others. So Shawn, I'm really blessed to have you in our program and to know you and be working with you. And I've just had so much fun on this topic with you. Thank you for being a part, and thank you for all the work you've done to bring this knowledge together today, because I think it's going to be really impactful. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate it. I hope I live up to that introduction. And the folks that are my friends now remain so, and the folks that I have yet to meet and get acquainted with and become friends with, I hope that this brings us closer together, gives us that opportunity. Let me share my slides here, and we can get started. As Steve said, I've spent a lot of time in the military, but I think it's important for everyone to hear a little bit more about my past so that you have some context. And not only did I spend most of my adult life in the military, but prior to that, as a kid growing up, my father was a naval intelligence officer, and he spent nearly 30 years in the service. And I grew up living overseas. So I went to kindergarten and first grade in Eleuthera in the Bahamas. I went to intermediate school in Eva Beach in Oahu in Hawaii. I started my high school I went from Hawaii to RAF Brodie, where my father was stationed in Wales, and went to my first year of high school in what was known as the fourth form in Haverfordwest Dyfed, Wales. Tiny little school there. I was the only American. I did a year there, and then I did 3 years, the balance of my high school in High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, England, where I graduated. And then my father transferred from Brodie to Keflavik, Iceland, and I went to college for 2 years in Munich, Germany. So I really feel like I had a very different childhood experience than the vast majority of people in this world. I joined the service after that, and was in the Navy as a nuclear engineer for 16 years, what they call electronics technician, chief petty officer when I left. And then I did something insane. I left the Navy and went into the Army and got a commission as an engineer officer in the Army. I did 16 years in the Army. My timing was really terrible. I did it just before 9/11. So shortly after I joined and went through the training pipeline and so on, I just spent the next 16 years of my life either going to Iraq or Afghanistan, or preparing to go to Iraq or Afghanistan. So that's an important context, because it sort of sets conditions for what I'm about to share. And really for the last, since I retired about 10 years ago from the service, I've been focused entirely on large scale, agile implementation. And the lessons that I've learned from that caused me to seek out ODC. I did not understand ODC initially. I knew something was missing in these agile efforts. And so it caused me to search out ODC and discover Steve and the amazing people that I keep meeting. So with that, I want to go on to the presentation, which is really about exploring a model that I believe represents the next evolution of how organizations adapt and learn and transform. And it's not by choosing agile and between agile and ODC, but really integrating the strengths of both into a single unified operating system. So my journey towards this model began more than 30 years ago in the Navy, and it's continued through my wartime experiences, large-scale transformation work in the defense industry, and now, of course, my doctoral research. Agile ODC is not simply a new framework. It's an attempt to bridge the disciplines that have been working in parallel for decades, frankly. ODC has deep wisdom, and Agile brings the operational engine. And what I've learned is neither really feels like enough. Agile ODC brings them together. My invitation to you is to join me in shaping the future of this work. To understand why Agile ODC matters and why now, let's start first with a brief story of how my own journey shaped its creation. So before we drive into my personal journey, I want to acknowledge something really important. ODC as a field has a remarkable legacy, nearly a century of scholarship on human behavior, leadership, culture, and systems. And over the last 15 to 20 years, ODC has found itself increasingly marginalized inside large transformation efforts. Agile came in with speed and cadence and evidence and a focus on delivery, and leadership teams naturally gravitated towards it because it felt operational and results oriented. But what I discovered was Agile lacked the human depth that ODC has cultivated for generations. And meanwhile, ODC often remained disconnected from operational reality. It often felt too slow, or it seemed episodic, or perhaps sometimes it felt very reliant on projects rather than embodied systems. And I know that's not the intent of OD, it's just how things evolved. This presentation isn't a critique of ODC, it's a celebration of what ODC provides and a recognition that to stay relevant in today's complex environments, ODC needs an engine. Agile alone cannot solve complexity. ODC alone cannot deliver at tempo. Agile ODC brings these two traditions together in a way that honors both. My own realization of this gap started decades ago, long before I ever heard the word Agile, and it was during my very early experiences in the Navy. My first encounter with what today we would call Agile occurred in 1992 with the Navy Total Quality Leadership Initiative, TQL. TQL is a derivative of Total Quality Management, TQM. At that time, I was a chief petty officer, a nuclear electronics technician, an instructor stationed at Naval Submarine School, and I was handpicked by the chief of naval operations to start working inside this field, this new TQL effort. At the time, I didn't really have any language of sprints or iterations or learning cycles, the things that you normally think of with Agile. But looking back, I realized TQL embodied the early Agile principles, continuous improvement, empowered frontline teams, and data-driven decision-making. And yet, TQL in the Navy failed. Not because the ideas were flawed, but because the culture failed to shift. Leaders endorsed TQL in name, but did not change their behavior. And sailors were given tools, but they didn't feel safe to use them. And the initiative lacked the deep cultural foundations that ODC has been advocating for decades. And this was my first lesson. You can't push a new operating model on an old culture. The culture will always win. And this echoed a lesson I heard from my very dear friend and mentor, Dr. Frances Baldwin, who is amongst us today. She recounted her work with Admiral Zumwalt, then Chief of Naval Operations, the CNO, in the early 70s. And at that time, the Navy was confronting deep challenges in racial inequality, representation, and the quality of life for sailors. Admiral Zumwalt's reform agenda most visibly expressed in his Z-grams. These were messages that he would send out throughout the Navy. They sought to modernize the service, expand opportunities for minority sailors, and strengthen equal opportunity programs, and ultimately create a more inclusive and humane Navy. And Dr. Baldwin was part of this pioneering effort, helping the CNO lead cultural change through long before really the language of diversity and inclusion was established that we know today. But once again, the culture resisted, and many of Admiral Zumwalt's forward-thinking initiatives foundered as soon as he was no longer the CNO. I lived through this as a kid. I remember my father talking about Admiral Zumwalt, and it's what connected me to Dr. Baldwin in a way that surprised us both, frankly. It's interesting how things happen over a glass of wine sometimes. My experience in TQL planted the early seeds that would later grow into Agile ODC. But that lesson was reinforced in far more painful ways during my deployments in Iraq in 2004 and 5. In 2000, as I said earlier, I transitioned from the Navy to the Army, and I received a commission as a combat engineer. And when I deployed in Iraq in 2004 and 5, I experienced firsthand what happens when an organization lacks a systemic way to learn and adapt. And at that time, we had no institutionalized counter improvised explosive device doctrine, IEDs. There was no standardized tactics, techniques, or procedures, no shared learning system. Every unit was discovering lessons on its own in real time under clearly life-threatening conditions. IEDs quickly became the #1 threat, and yet we did not have a mechanism, organizationally or culturally, to sense, learn, and respond with the speed required. And eventually the Army did develop a rapid learning ecosystem. They updated their TTPs, techniques and procedures, rapid fielding of equipment and real-time intelligence sharing. But really, it came very late after a lot of unnecessary casualties. And of course, this profoundly shaped my belief that learning cannot be an afterthought. Organizations that cannot learn quickly are not just inefficient, they're vulnerable. And in fact, in this context, I would say organizations that cannot learn quickly or are not efficient in battle lead. The same pattern isn't limited to the battlefield. In fact, it shows up across every sector we work in today. And what I learned in Iraq is not exclusive to the military. The same failure pattern appears across civilian sectors. I've seen this firsthand. It's slower, sure, and quieter and less visible ways, but healthcare, for example, being overwhelmed by rapid technological, regulatory, and demographic changes, and yet it lacks integrated systems to adapt its workflows and its culture. Higher education faces enrollment cliffs and shifting student expectations and financial pressures, and yet change initiatives often remain siloed and painfully slow. Government agencies struggle with legacy systems, policy constraints, and workforce burnout. Corporate environments face high turnover, digital transformation demands, and the need to innovate as fast as possible, faster than ever, really. In each case, the environment is changing faster than the organization's ability to learn and adapt. This is not a failure of intelligence or effort. I argue it's a failure of operating systems. The world has become more complex than the structures we built to manage it. And Agile has transformed the way organizations deliver products and services. It brings a cadence and transparency, iterative improvement, and a powerful focus on flow. But what I've discovered is Agile alone was never designed to transform culture or shift leadership mindsets. Frankly, Agile assumes psychological safety, shared purpose, and collaborative environment, but it doesn't create them. Agile also offers limited guidance on sense-making, identity, power dynamics, resistance, inquiry, or even human motivation. These are all areas that ODC has spent decades developing. Agile ceremonies can become mechanical if they're not grounded in the meaning and human development. And in many organizations, Agile has become a set of tools rather than a system of thinking. And again, I've seen this firsthand repeated over and over again. So Agile solves only one half of the challenge, the delivery engine. But without the human system, the culture, or the leadership transformation, it cannot address complexity. To understand the full picture, we also need to look honestly at where ODC struggles. Now let's turn to the ODC side. ODC brings extraordinary strengths: participation, inquiry, reflective practice, systems thinking, culture work, and leadership development. These capabilities are essential for creating the meaning, the shared purpose, and the psychological safety that organizations desperately need these days. But ODC alone struggles to keep pace with the speed and complexity of today's operating environments. Many ODC interventions remain, or at least feel like, they're episodic. They're often perceived to be consultant-driven, and certainly many business leaders and leaders in the military think of it as slow. They feel like they rely on large group events or long cycle assessments that can't respond quickly to emerging complexity. And while ODC excels at engaging the system, it often lacks a disciplined, repeatable, and operational delivery engine. It doesn't embed itself in the flow of work. And I know ODC wants to. It isn't designed to operate at sprint cadence, reduce change waste through empirical tests, or adapt weekly as conditions shift. And that's not a flaw. It's a gap that I see. But I think it's a gap that we can close. And this brings me to a core insight. Agile and ODC each hold half of the answer. Neither can meet today's complexity alone. And this is where the breakthrough happened for me. After decades of seeing Agile transformation stall and ODC interventions fail, I came to realize that the two disciplines are not opposites, they're complements. Agile brings the organizational engine, iteration, feedback, flow, and empirical learning. ODC encompasses the human system, including culture, meaning, leadership, and participation. And these are not competing paradigms. They are interdependent. And however, because Agile and ODC evolved separately, Agile from software development and ODC from social systems, social science, we tend to treat them as if they belong in different rooms. And meanwhile, the problems we face today are socio-technical. They require human and technical learning at the same time. The insight was simple, but powerful. Agile and ODC each solve one half of the complexity puzzle. Agile ODC integrates them into a single operating system. So let me introduce the Agile ODC model, the unified operating system I believe our organizations desperately need. And here is the model. It's built to unify the strengths of both traditions in a single adaptive operating system for change. The model is structured around 5 phases, each representing a core capability an organization needs to navigate complexity. Phase 1 is sense making, where we map the system, explore multiple interpretations, and generate hypotheses, not assumptions, about what is actually happening. Phase 2 is visioning and set-based design, where we co-create future possibilities and intentionally keep multiple pathways open. Phase 3 is iterative experimentation, where we test those options in parallel in small, safe-to-fail cycles. Phase 4 is institutionalizing and scaling, where we converge on what works and embed it into the system. And phase 5 is continuous adaptation, where learning becomes perpetual and the organization becomes a true learning organism. Agile ODC is not a maturity model, not a methodology, not a project. It's an operating system that blends delivery, culture, leadership, learning, and adaptation into a cohesive whole. So with that overview, let's walk through each phase a little more deeply, beginning with sense making. Phase 1 of Agile ODC is sense making and diagnosis. This phase is about understanding what is actually happening in the system, not what we assume is happening, not what a sponsor hopes is happening, but what the organization is truly experiencing. We begin by exploring multiple interpretations of the data because in complex systems, the truth is rarely singular and certainly not obvious. We use approaches from wake sense-making, organizational ethnography, readiness scans, and stakeholder interviews. We map interdependencies, constraints, and patterns, and importantly, we generate hypotheses, not solutions. This distinguishes Agile ODC from traditional OD or Agile transformations, which often jump prematurely into action. Sense-making creates the intellectual humility needed for complexity. It builds alignment. It uncovers root causes and prevents the classic failure mode of solving the wrong problem beautifully. Once we've understood the system and identified the hypothesis worth exploring, we shift to phase 2, envisioning what is possible and intentionally designing multiple options. Phase 2 is where we co-create the future. Traditional strategic planning asks us to choose one path and commit to it. Agile ODC intentionally resists that impulse. Instead, we use set-based design, an approach drawn from lean product development, to explore multiple solution pathways in parallel. We begin with appreciative inquiry-inspired visioning and anchor the work in strengths and possibilities. And then we design several alternative configurations for how the system could function. These are not fantasy futures. They are grounded in what we learned in phase 1 and built through collaborative design with the people who live in the system every day. The goal in phase 2 is not to pick a solution. The goal is to create a diverse portfolio of promising options that we can test empirically. This is one of the defining differences between Agile ODC and traditional OD initiatives, which often converge too quickly on senior leadership preference rather than evidence. With multiple pathways defined, we now move to the heart of Agile ODC operating system, the iterative experimentation. And phase 3 is where the organization starts learning by doing. This phase integrates action research cycles with Agile sprint rhythms. Instead of choosing one solution and implementing it broadly, we test multiple options in small, controlled, low-risk experiments. These experiments are time-boxed, they're empirical, and they're designed with the people who will carry them out. We test new workflows, governance patterns, team configurations, feedback loops, or technology-enabled processes. The goal is never perfection, it's learning. This phase embodies the principles of safe to fail. Not every experiment will succeed. In fact, some of the most valuable data comes from learning what doesn't work. Agile ODC treats failure as information and uses it to narrow the field of options. And through this disciplined exploration, the organization develops greater confidence in what to scale. Once we've collected evidence and identified what actually works, we move into phase 4, embedding and scaling the successful patterns. Phase 4 is where we converge. After testing multiple options, we analyze the evidence, identify the configurations that produced meaningful improvements. Rather than scaling based on leadership preference, political priorities, or intuition, we scale based on data. Institutionalization isn't a bureaucracy, it's intentional design. We clarify governance, workflow patterns, decision rights, role definitions, and cultural commitments. And we embed the new practices into existing systems so that they are sustainable. Importantly, this phase includes ongoing support for teams as they adopt, adapt, and integrate the new patterns. It's not really a one-time rollout. This is where Agile ODC distinguishes itself from a lot of traditional OD. Instead of hosting a large retreat or a project closeout, we used institutionalization to make learning permanent, stable, and repeatable. And once these practices are embedded, we enter the final stage, keeping the organization adaptive. Phase 5 is continuous adaptation. And it is really the heartbeat of Agile ODC. Once an organization has embedded new practices and governance patterns, the work is not done. In today's environment, nothing stays stable for long. Technology evolves, strategies shift, missions change, people rotate, and constraints emerge without warning. Continuous adaptation gives the organization a way to keep sensing, learning, and adjusting as part of everyday operations. This includes structured retrospectives, data-driven reviews, and a whole systems reflection. But it also includes micro-adaptations, adjusting team agreements, refining workflows, evolving roles, and updating decision rights. The goal is to shift the organization from being project-based change culture to becoming a learning organism, where continuous improvement, inquiry, and adaptation are part of the operating system, not an intervention. With the 5 phases laid out, let's turn back to the broader question. Where can Agile ODC create the most value? And to me, the answer is, frankly, everywhere. But let's start with civilian sectors. Agile ODC is not intended only for technology defense. That's my background. Of course, that's where a lot of my thinking has been influenced. But in reality, the conditions that created the need for Agile ODC, complexity and interdependence and speed and cultural misalignment, those exist in every sector. Healthcare organizations face constant regulatory change, staffing shortages, and the integration of new technologies. They need a structured way to adapt workflows while maintaining safety and care quality. Higher education must redesign the learning models, administrative processes, and financial structures while respecting deeply rooted academic culture. City governance must modernize their services, respond to crises, and engage communities, yet face legacy systems and bureaucratic constraints. Corporate environments are navigating digital transformation, hybrid work, and generational workforce shifts. Nonprofits must adapt quickly to funding changes and shifting missions and community needs. Agile ODC offers these sectors a way to blend disciplined delivery with meaningful cultural engagement. It gives them a system for learning their way into the future. So let's turn back to this question. Where can Agile ODC create the most value? Again, I say it's everywhere. Now, the defense sector in particular is facing scale and speed changes we haven't seen since the end of the Cold War. Adversaries are evolving faster, innovating faster than our traditional acquisition cycles can respond. Technology has been advancing on like a 12 to 18-month cycle and probably even faster than that, while programs of record still operate in decades-long timelines. Requirements are outdated before the systems are even fielded. Defense organizations need a way to learn, adapt, and innovate at operational tempo. They need an operating system that blends disciplined delivery with cultural adaptability, something neither Agile nor OD&C alone can provide. Agile ODC gives defense organizations a way to modernize culture, accelerate learning, improve cross-functional collaboration, and integrate operators into the design of systems. It positions ODC as a strategic asset in modernization, not an afterthought. And this need isn't theoretical. Congress and now the Department of War, formerly the Department of Defense, they are already signaling massive structural changes in acquisition and development. Congress has moved aggressively to reform how the United States acquires and fields new capabilities. The SPEED Act and the FORWARD Act are represented really a fundamental shift in how Agile on how acquisition programs are expected to operate. They emphasize faster contracting, reduced bureaucracy, rapid prototyping, greater autonomy for operators and engineers. And these mandates are not simply about procurement. They are signaling a cultural transformation, a massive one. These reforms create a once-in-a-generation opportunity for organization development and change. Because transforming acquisitions at this scale is fundamentally a change in culture, fundamentally a change in culture challenge, it's not really just about process update. They're telling us learn faster, develop sooner, empower teams, flatten decision cycles, and move from rigid programs to iterative capability development. Agile ODC provides a structured approach to responding to these mandates. It gives organizations a disciplined operating system that integrates cultural adaptation, rapid experimentation, and continuous learning, exactly the capabilities that Congress is demanding. This sets the stage for a crucial leadership shift, one that aligns perfectly with Agile ODC. It's known as Mission Command. One of the most significant shifts happening in defense and increasingly in civilian sectors is the move towards Mission Command. Mission Command is a leadership philosophy that emphasizes decentralized decision-making, clear intent, empowered execution, and trust. The mindset aligns perfectly with Agile OD&C. Mission Command requires leaders to communicate intent, not orders, to set boundaries, not prescribe solutions, to empower teams, not micromanage process. Agile ODC provides the operating system that allows Mission Command to function through continuous learning, sense-making, safe-to-fail experimentation, and rapid feedback. You cannot have Mission Command with a command and control operating system. You cannot scale Mission Command culture without a disciplined delivery engine that reinforces empowerment. Agile ODC is the connective tissue that binds leadership intent to organizational behavior. And this alignment with Mission Command opens a unique opportunity for the ODC profession itself, because the future of defense transformation depends on human systems, not just technology. ODC is at an inflection point. The field has a rich intellectual lineage from Lewin to Argyris to Shine to Cooper Ryder to Senge, but the environment has changed faster than our operating models. Many ODC interventions feel very project-based and come across as episodic or even disconnected from the operational realities. The future of ODC depends on its ability to embed itself in the flow of work, to become part of how organizations operate every day, not just something we introduce during crisis or planned transformation. I know that's the goal of ODC ultimately, but we need to do better. Agile ODC gives ODC practitioners a new platform, a disciplined operating system where culture, participation, and collaborative learning becomes structural, not situational. It's not a replacement of ODC. It is a revitalization. Agile ODC elevates ODC into the center of the enterprise transformation, connecting our field's deepest strengths with an engine capable of meeting the demands of modern complexity. You know, before we discuss where ODC is headed, I want to honor where it's come from. This graphic, which I co-created with Dr. Carol Gorsuch, it maps nearly a century of ODC history. The founders, the institution, the books, the thought leaders, the movements, and the world events that shaped our field. This is a work in progress, a prototype, if you will, that Carol is leading. I definitely encourage you to reach out to her. She can send you a link to this so that you can look at the details of it. I know it's difficult to read here on the slide. But if you look across the decades, you're going to see not just incredible intellectual richness of this profession. You'll understand that ODC grew out of social psychology, humanistic leadership, T groups, Tavistock, NTL, systems theory, appreciative inquiry and action research, some of the most profound contributions to human-centered organizational work ever created. But you'll also notice a pattern. The density of activity, authors, and institutional energy begins to thin out as we approach 2000s. And this trend continues dramatically into the 2010s and 2020s. This is not because ODC becomes less valuable. In fact, I argue its wisdom is needed now more than ever. It's because the world changed faster than the profession's operating model. The pace of technological disruption, complexity, geopolitical volatility, and social technical interdependence simply outstripped ODC's ability to keep up using episodic and project-based interventions. Meanwhile, other human-centered professions, coaching, human resource development, project management, organizational psychology, facilitations, they all develop strong competency models, robust certifications, large membership bases, and clear pathways into practice. ODC didn't. And that fragmentation shows up in the data. This graphic is not a criticism of ODC, it's a tribute and a wake-up call. It shows us the legacy we stand on and the urgency of evolving how ODC shows up in a world that now requires learning cycles, empirical adaptation, socio-technical design, and continuous sense-making. Agile ODC is how we begin to reverse this slope, not by abandoning ODC's heritage, but by giving it the operating engine it never had. This is how we help ODC rise again. And this brings us to the second data point Steve, Katie, and I uncovered. ODC hasn't just slowed historically. Compared to its peer professions today, it has fallen behind structurally as well. And let me show you what we discovered. Building on the historical art that we just explored, this is another vital insight from the work that Steve and I uncovered earlier this year. Together, we examined how ODC compares to the other primary human-centered professions, including fields such as coaching and HR development, change management, organizational psychology, learning and development, and the broader human-centered professions. And what we found was both validating and deeply concerning. ODC sits right at the center of human-centered constellation. It has the broadest integrative approach. It possesses competencies that none of the other professions fully possess. Whole systems intervention, large group methods, socio-technical awareness, emergent design, and collective sense-making. However, when we examine the structural aspects, including professional identity, certifications, competency frameworks, pipelines for new practitioners, research outputs, and public recognition, ODC has fallen behind nearly all of its peer fields. Coaching has a global certification industry. HRD has standardized pathways. Learning and development has clear competencies. Organizational psychology has licensure and academic infrastructure. ODC has the deepest wisdom, but the least professional scaffolding. This isn't a judgment. I'm holding up a mirror. It tells us that ODC's challenge is not its intellectual foundation. It's the lack of an operating system that allows the field to scale, renew itself, and meet today's complexity. And that's exactly where Agile ODC comes in. Agile ODC gives ODC the delivery engine, the empirical learning loops, the adaptive cadence, the socio-technical integration that restores the field's relevance and enables it to lead again. This is how we bring ODC back to the center of organizational transformation, not as a side practice, but as the operating philosophy modern systems require. Agile ODC is more than a model. It's the beginning of a movement. It represents the way of thinking about change that integrates the best of ODC with the best of agile and complexity science. But no movement is built alone. My invitation to you is to join me in shaping the future of this work. Help test the model. Help refine it. Share applications and insights. Bring Agile ODC to your organizations, your classrooms, your research, and your consulting practice. The world needs ODC now more than ever. But it needs ODC equipped with an operating engine capable of rising to modern challenges. We have an opportunity right here, right now, to restore ODC's relevance, influence, and strategic value. And together, we can help organizations learn faster, adapt smarter, and change the pace the world requires. Before we close, let me preview the work, where the work's heading next, and how you can continue to contribute. This presentation is really just the beginning of a larger body of work, and over the next year, I plan to develop a book that captures the full Agile ODC model, including case studies for defense, civilian, municipal, and enterprise environments. I'm working on a certification pathway, a practitioner toolkit, and a set of training programs that will enable leaders, facilitators, and consultants to apply this model within their own organizations. And in parallel, Nexus for Change will become a collaborative platform where we can collectively build this field. My hope is that Agile ODC becomes a shared intellectual space, a place where ODC scholars and practitioners can shape the next evolution of whole systems transformation together. If this resonates with you, I invite you to help shape the research. Join the early adopter community and contribute your experience. This is a field that we're building together, and what follows is an early working bibliography, an evolving foundation of the thinkers, the practitioners, and research traditions that are shaping Agile ODC model. This list will expand as I work on the manuscript for the book, and my dissertation matures. So this slide really is the early working bibliography. It's a foundation of the thinkers, the research traditions, the practice communities that are shaping the Agile ODC model. You'll see here a blend of classic OD scholarship, action research, psychological safety, sense-making, complexity science, lean, set-based design, agile at scale frameworks, adaptive leadership, emerging work on acquisitions reform, and socio-technical change. This list is really incomplete at this point. As the book evolves, the certification pathway matures, and the Nexus for Change platform develops, this bibliography will expand to include additional resources from defense innovation, mission command, and dual-use technology research, which is something I personally am interested in. What matters here is the intellectual lineage. Agile ODC is built on decades of rigorous inquiry and field-tested practices. These scholars and practitioners provide the conceptual scaffolding behind the model and the legitimacy that allows us to stand on solid academic ground as we scale it across sectors. I'm sharing this now so you can see the depth of the research base we're drawing from. And so anyone who wants to explore this further or help shape the iteration has a clear picture of where to begin. So as we conclude, I want to leave you with one final reflection. For decades, ODC has been helping organizations understand themselves, helping them listen and learn and adapt and grow. But the world we live in today demands more than understanding. It demands action. It demands speed. It demands the ability to learn in real time. Agile ODC is my contribution to that challenge. A unified operating system that brings together the rigor of Agile delivery with the relational depth of ODC. But this work cannot and should not be done alone. It will take an entire community of scholars, practitioners, leaders, researchers to refine it, test it, challenge it, and expand it. My hope is that the Agile ODC becomes not just a model, but a shared space where all of us can contribute to the next evolution of ODC as a profession, a space where we honor our past, confront our present, and build a future worthy of the challenges we face. Thank you all for being part of this journey. Thank you for being here today. And I look forward to continuing this work with all of you. Steve, back to you.
I think everybody needs to click on their reactions and throw up, let's see what I want to throw. I want to throw up some applause. I'm going to throw up some, yeah. All right, so we'll do two things. One is in the chat, what's your big takeaway? If you all could say, this is the one thing I'm taking away from this that is something I want to remember. And what's a question? And then we'll in a few minutes, we'll ask about a suggestion. But I want to take a minute to kind of give you all a chance to put some of your reactions and some questions that are coming up for you. Lisa, if you can bring everybody in, and that would be great in terms of the whole group. Yep, there we go. So if we're back. So if you're able to turn your camera on, that's great. If not, no worries, but we'd love to see you if possible. So, I think, Shawn, it's really obvious you've given a lot of thought and put brought a lot of pieces together in a very coherent way. Anybody out there have a reaction to what you heard that you want to share out here with all of us?
Well, I'm seeing a couple of notes in the chat here about the slide about evolve or die, and the table that kind of depicts the other professions and how they stack up to us. This was a really alarming thing that Steve and I, maybe we sensed it, and certainly Steve did. But when you actually look at the data, it paints a pretty stark picture, and one that caused me to think, now, how do I provide leadership? How can I contribute to the field? I don't think I'll ever be a Francis Baldwin or a Steve Cady, or any of the intellectual giants that are in ODC as a field. But I have a lot of experience, and I feel like ODC is something that I have been missing in Agile interventions in a meaningful way. And over time, I started to recognize that these two things really belong together. And as I started practicing these large-scale Agile implementations, we're talking about thousands of people, really sometimes even tens of thousands, I saw this giant gap that the people were being left behind, that people were trying to implement these things more like, do these processes and not really actually connecting them to the people in them.
Yeah. Well, Frances had unmuted. She wanted to say something. I think Ryan had something he wanted to say. So if anybody wants to come in and say something or pose a question, we also want to capture your reactions and key points. So in the chat, that will help advance this. So any advice, any questions, any reactions that you can put into the chat will be cataloged and used to help build out and add to this and all the other things that we're working on around this. Frances, where are you? I don't see you. You moved. Oh, there you are.
Thank you for reading my mind. The thing that makes me feel good about this presentation, Shawn, is when you describe Agile OD, I release all the tension I have about the limitations that you see in OD itself. It doesn't matter because your way of operating is to embody. And if you are the future and you can embody this practice by any name in the way that you described it, it doesn't matter where it comes from. So I will stop arm wrestling you about what OD is and what it isn't. The challenge that I think you help to overcome, OD has always been an amoeba. There's no form. There is no certification. Hang out your shingle and you're an OD person. But I think what you're bringing is what's important, is that you're bringing form, credibility, certification, inclusiveness. And as I move toward my rocker in my garden, I feel safe. I feel like the field is safe in your hands.
Thank you so much. I don't even know what to add to that. I feel really overwhelmed with gratitude.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good, Shawn. And Ryan, and then Linda and David, in that order.
Yeah, this is great, Shawn. You shoved a lot into this hour, and that's kind of where I want to go. There is a ton of stuff happening in what Agile has become now and what it is becoming. So I admire and want to celebrate the fact that you're doing this, that you're bringing these ostensibly disparate disciplines together. So again, just a celebration of you in this work.
Thank you. I actually don't see them as very disparate. I see a lot, now that I understand OD a lot better, I see a lot of OD in the roots of Agile. And the realization for me in my search to do better Agile implementation at scale, I first understood that it was a cultural shift. And so that's how I started going down this OD path, asking how do I shape culture? I understood from my experience that you don't attack culture directly, that you set conditions or the ecosystem for a culture to emerge. And leaders are heavily implicated by that. So that's really what got me going down this path and thinking about it more broadly. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that feedback.
Excellent.
So I too appreciate the integration of the work that you've done, which is really fabulous. My question and my challenge is often when we have new frameworks and we have new methodologies, it's something out there that we need to learn to do. And my question is something I feel that's been lost over the years of OD. In the early days, it was a lot of emphasis on self as instrument, who we are as consultants and supporting leaders to be who they need to be. And I haven't seen that in a long time, years. And so my question is how to use this and develop this in a way that the people who use it, the leaders who need to embody it, we address mindset, we address behavior, we address culture from a 4-quadrant perspective, as well as the system that you've created. And that the building out of this is you'll continue to build out the how do we do this thing, but also how do we as practitioners need to represent the same principles, embody the same principles, and support leaders to open up their mindsets and their styles and their ways of operating and their modeling to be able to live this in their organizations. So for me, an additional parallel emphasis needs to be on the development of practitioners and leaders to be able to succeed at this integration you've so beautifully laid out.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I wanted to throw in, Shawn, something on this. Jennifer Traxford, if you go into if you type in Google like Scholar Works and BGSU and DODC,
I'll share the link.
It'll take you right to her dissertation. So Jennifer Traxford was one of my first students in the DODC program. When we worked on we worked on trying to crystallize a little bit better the use of self framework, and did the content analysis of a lot of definitions going back to Virginia Satir and others, and watching and it talks about the history of use of self. One of the things we uncovered is, and we're able to verify in the dissertation, and there's a second study we're going to do, because there's a fourth characteristic, but use of self, just getting people a framework to understand use of self, like within which where areas to work on. It was a little bit elusive, even the use of self concepts. And so what we found was that there's a self-awareness, there's an interpersonal awareness, there's a situational awareness, and then there's intentional action. And those four, if we can get people to develop those four areas, together, I think that you're right. I think that's critical to understanding how to leverage this model, because what I always say is when you do Agile ODC or OD&C, you have to do, it is the biggest pathway to personal work of any profession, and so I really value that. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I value you laying out those four attributes. For us, the greatest challenge and the greatest necessity is creating experiences for us consultants and for the leaders that we serve. So it's not intellectual, these are the steps you climb. It really is experientially learned and embodied. And
right on.
That's my emphasis.
Right on. And as you all are listening, any tips, any thoughts, anything to help put into a catalog, since we got a great group of people here, would be a great gift to Shawn and to me around suggestions or things. And we can follow up with you because your name's attached to that. So David, and then Brian, and then we'll shift into our interview in the ODC deep dive, but let's do that.
Shawn, I really love the energy that you're bringing to this, and I think you and I have had a chance to talk, at least on the surface, about some of these issues previously. I'm really impressed by the progress you've made. I'm curious about your vision for a long-term project to accomplish the work that you've just called us to. You're essentially issuing a call to action, which I 100% agree with and support and want to be part of. How would you suggest we go about organizing to make that vision happen? Even if you don't have well-framed ideas, I'd love to hear some speculation.
Well, I kind of like the model that we're in now. We have like a community, and I'm already starting to. Now, listen, I've been working on my doctorate for just over a year and a half, and I feel like I've made more of the highest level connections to some of the best thought leaders in this field than I ever imagined possible. And it's been through the Nexus for Change, frankly. So I believe that first it'll be probably something within that framework. What it looks like beyond that, I'm not sure yet. I'm really just trying to.
I think if I could add, Shawn, if I could add,
Yeah, go ahead.
Tag on to what you're saying, and I think, David, this is a part of you and me and our talk that we've had at the OD gathering in Baltimore, and us originally talking about our passion around helping to elevate and professionalize the field so that it can have greater impact. But it goes back to a couple things. Shawn, I don't know, David, if you have this, or Teo, if you have the chapter 6 for the practicing OD with Rothwell, Stavros, and myself, the 5th edition, chapter 6. In there, we talk about we look at the human-centric professions out there that Shawn showed you on that chart with the X's and checks. We did a thematic analysis with David, Shawn, myself, and Zach Shoup, and one other person. And we did a thematic analysis and identified what do all the human-centric professions, what competencies do they all share in their competency models? And then looked at what does ODC do that's in addition to those shared competencies. That's part of, David, of what we are going to be working on, along with the initiative out of the Academy of Management around developing, a strategy for the future of the field. And we've been working on that for 3 years, but we will have more of that. And Shawn's a part of that as well. You all will get invited to those things. So David, I think those are all, we got to connect all those dots, and we've got to get the scholars, the practitioners, the leaders in industry, and people who care about this coming together to partner. But I'll stop there because we got to ask Shawn some questions. Brian has something to follow. We might have time for one more question. If someone has a burning question, put it up there. But Brian, let me turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Sean, great presentation. Very nice to meet you virtually. And I had my experience has been how key leadership is in developing these systems and maintaining these systems. What are your thoughts on how to build a robust system that can be impervious to leadership changes? So, as you said, the thinking of the leader has a huge influence on what the output of the system is. We should go this way, where the system might be saying we need to go a different way. What's your experience been with that? And I'm sure in the military you've changed commanders multiple times. So,
Yeah.
what are the key elements to that?
Well, lots to say there. In the interest of time, and I'll try to be somewhat brief. In the military, you call it command climate. So there was lots of times when I would take command and I would inherit a command climate that I had nothing to do with, and it could be a negative one. But I was expected to create a positive one where people felt good about the work they were doing and being part of the organization. So that's how I think of leaders, creating a command climate. And that's modeling, emulating behaviors and actions, and treating people with dignity and respect, empowerment. I was a platoon leader once, and I remember doing PT in formation with my platoon. And of course, I didn't run in formation. I ran next to them. And I was super fit, and probably fitter than anybody else in my platoon of, roughly 40 guys. And so what I did was, as they would run down the road on this 5-mile run, I ran around them. Now, usually you do that for punishment. I did it to show off. And I had this stark example where I was this hyper fit guy. I ran. We were doing this exercise where I ran to the top of the hill. We were trying to take over the hill as a training exercise, and I was the first one up there. And this grizzled old sergeant walks up to me. He was kind of what they called observer controller. Congratulated me on being the first one to die. And I realized at that moment that that's not my job. My job is about empowering people. It's about a different leadership role. It's not really being the first with the most at the top of the hill. It's about us all arriving together, leaving nobody behind, and really creating the conditions for everybody else to be successful.
So may I just add something to that, Shawn? And I just want to add something, and it's a challenge we are always going to face. If you go back to the example of the Navy, the CNO he was the chief of naval operations. He had done it with the Navy. I have letters between Congress and that chief of naval operations. It was Congress that shut down what he did. So when we talk about the culture and environment, the Navy didn't quit. Congress said no, because you're weakening command readiness.
Yeah.
So there's always the bigger system that influences us. And that is something we cannot lose sight of, even though we still try to influence that. But the thing that drives through the middle of all of this, what is the locus of control? Where does things get decided, and how does change happen? You got to look at what makes change happen in order to be able to penetrate that.
Thank you,
I don't
Francis.
want to be a damper. That's just the reality.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Francis, and I appreciate that. We're going to shift gears now, unless somebody has like this burning thing that they need to say. All right, and Janine appreciates that comment. I love the smile and the reaction to that. And so let's jump into the deep dive in OD&C. Shawn, you said something a minute ago. You're not a something, and self-deprecatingly, suggesting that you may not have something to offer to the field. I think if you commit to this, and you're a pretty healthy guy, so you'll be around for a few more years. I think you're going to be able to do something with all of this to have a major influence on the field. And so I think it's important for you to own that and own what you know and step into that space. And even if it feels a bit premature, you're never going to feel ready. And if you feel stretched, that's exactly where you should be. So I invite you to step into that stretch space of owning what you are seeing and believing. I think it's worth it, and the world deserves that from you. So with that, I got David Bright. So David and I, if you'll want to kind of, at least you want to bring David, myself, and Shawn together. And we have some questions we're going to ask that are related to the field. And those of you that have been a part of this know some of these questions. We're asking these questions over and over again because part of this endeavor to instantiate the field, to bring it to the next level, to revitalize and build on the shoulders of all those that have come before us. We want to go back to that point that you made around, well, let's start bringing some evidence-based approaches to building foundations for the field. And part of that involves qualitative analysis, grounded theory, maybe an abductive approach, which is an inductive and deductive approach to looking at the field and asking questions that we can thematically analyze. So we're going to jump in with ODC questions. We're recording it. We're going to thematically analyze it. All of you out there are going to get the results of what we thematically analyze. And I'll jump in. Do you want me to jump in, David, or do you want to kick us off? And you're frozen, David, if you're here. There, where's David?
We lost him.
I'll go and then he'll come when he comes back in. His internet may have frozen up a little bit. So we're looking at defining the field. So how do you now define the field of ODC? And how would you say that definition has shifted for you over time?
Well, ODC, I see it really as like a whole system. It's evidence-based, and it ultimately enables organizations to learn, adapt, and transform. And that's what drew me into it. I saw that learn, adapt, transform. My view shifted when I started thinking about integrating the ODC methods, I guess, with my own agile implementation. And I began to realize that really the two things could be, and maybe should always have been, integrated into kind of an operational cadence with for cultural change.
Okay, and I'm taking some notes here. Let me go back to this one here. How do you see it differentiating itself from the other disciplines? Agile ODC is in project management, which if you all go type in Project Management Institute, you'll find that they've also been really trying to bring Agile into their defining who they are as an institute. But how would you differentiate this from other disciplines?
A very concise way to describe that is I saw ODC as uniquely positioned at the intersection of things that I was very interested in: culture, participation, and systemic change. And unlike things like strategy and HR or process improvement disciplines, I saw ODC as the one that was trying to focus on building adaptive capacity. And that as an agilist, that really attracted me. Because our world is so volatile and there's so much technological disruption, and in particular, I knew this was coming, and it has happened now with the defense acquisition reform. It's really demanding an operating system for learning, and that's precisely what I wanted to bring from OD into my Agile practice to make this ODC model.
Gotcha. Okay. And you and Carol put together the historical timeline, right?
Yeah.
As you look across all of that, what would be some of the key figures for you that have now jumped out, the key historical figures in the field for you?
Well, Kurt Lewin obviously is somebody that, we all know and love, and I keep going back to him because he's so amazing, and he died so young too. I think my first entry really was Edgar Schein, where I was trying to, this whole thing about agile was, to me, was a combination of leadership challenge and a cultural challenge. So I started reading Edgar Schein's stuff, Chris Argus, Peter Senge, Cooper Ryder. I stumbled into somewhat recently, in the last couple of years. I think things around action research and learning organizations and culture. I didn't know this term until I started this program, appreciative inquiry. But that's something that's, in fact, I might have even had a little bit of a negative response to it when I first saw it. But I've since realized the power of it. And I think all those things are really the intellectual backbone of the field. And those are the key leaders that have probably inspired me the most.
And so, good. So are there any new voices, current voices, anything coming in now, any current work that really has jumped out for you?
Well, I don't know if a current is, what's current mean? Like this last year or something. I mean, I'd say current, relevant to me right now where I'm at. Amy Edmondson, psychological safety. Steve, you with the idea of the whole systems change is something that really resonated with me. And there's a lot of little spin-off discussions that relate to that you've had a really big influence on me. And David Coughlin, who unfortunately I missed his briefing when he came here, but I did get to see others from him. There's probably a bunch of guys with agility and social technical systems. I can't remember their names off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. And then, so David's here. He's back. I'll go ahead and take the next one and bring David up and on the screen if you can, Lisa. And then I'll pose this next one here. What are the most important theories or models or frameworks that are informing your work now? As you look at this, what were the key ones you pulled in, the very explicit models or templates or tools that you that you've brought in, or theories that you've brought in?
Well, clearly action research. I mean, that's an iterative cycle, and that's an agile approach, and so it fits with my worldview. There's a lot of stuff in the scaled agile framework, and a lot of it is informed by OD. So I probably start there a lot. Set-based design is this idea of experimenting with a large number of things and then using the feedback that you get and the learning that you get to narrow down and select the best possible choice. So mission command is something that I really appreciate. The military changed this mindset from command and control to mission command probably 25 or more years ago. And I'm surprised to see that they led industry. And so even in my own company that I'm in, there's still an awful lot of command and control, not mission command. Systems, let's see, systems thinking, sense making, psychological safety. These are all really important models. I really wanted to unify all those by combining the behavioral science with this iterative learning cycle. So a lot of these really fit into that model.
Great. Thanks, Shawn. David, glad you're back. So
Thank you.
are you tracking? Are you able to jump in?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're on core competencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had an internet outage here, so I've switched over to my backup. From your perspective, what are the 5 to 7 essential competencies for practitioners working in organizational change? And from your perspective on scholars, what would be the competencies of scholars to support organization development and change as a field?
Well, the first I'd say is sense making, which is something that terminology I only recently understood. The way I thought of it was, as I said in my briefing, you have to learn your way into the future, right? So that's the whole idea about Agile is to sense something, understand it, and then react to that, and do that in small iterative cycles, and you're more likely to have a better outcome. So sense making was really important. I've since learned facilitation. I don't think I'm personally naturally a great facilitator, but I'm learning to be better. And there are folks who've told me that I've done really well, but I personally feel like I've got a long ways to go, because I've seen really good facilitators, people like Steve and Frances, who I thought was magnificent when I saw her. Psychological safety is probably a really important one, creating it anyhow, making people feel like they can speak up. Systems thinking is probably one of the most important things. Don't think of yourself and what's just immediately around you. You got to think beyond that. It's a conceptual thing. Iterative experimentation is another thing that I think is a really important skill. I've learned the importance of research literacy. I had some of that before I came into this doctoral effort, but I've since rediscovered how valuable it is to me as a practitioner, and I'm really grateful for that rediscovery. Maybe the last thing is, like, how do you integrate culture with operational execution? That's a really helpful skill too.
Okay. What about the scholar side? What are the competencies that scholars need to be able to advance this work?
Well, I think the most important was that research literacy. Go out and read, not just, you read widely and get exposure to the foundations, and then the most recent research is, I spend a lot of time looking at research, actually, not just because what I find is that, my professors are loading me up with a lot of stuff, right? That's what they do. But it winds up piquing my interest about something. And now I have tools to go out and find the most recent research in a particular little niche that I'm interested in. And I'm able to quickly wade through it. Like, I can get rid of the trash very fast now and kind of get to the gem that I need to help inform my thinking with something that's evidence-based. And that skill is a very powerful skill that served me very well. And I've gone from being like a neophyte at it, where I had some of those things, to where I feel really good at it now.
Very good. Thank you. Steve, do you want to do knowledge foundations, or?
You can keep going.
All right. So for someone who's building a strong knowledge base in ODC, what are the core articles, books, journals, periodicals, handbooks, platforms? What would you suggest?
There's so many I've been exposed to in the last year. I think Shine was the first one that I wasn't included as like a textbook or what have you, but I started digging at the questions that I had about culture. And I discovered his book, and I realized, oh my God, this is fantastic. And I don't think it was in print anymore. And I went out and found a way to get the book. And, his thinking about organization, culture, and leadership, I thought was really important. White, I think is how you pronounce the name, his sense making. That was a new discovery for me. And I went out and bought that book. In fact, I got it. Right here, sense making organization. So again, a book that's not in print, but I searched for it and found it and got a beautiful copy of it. Coughlin, I appreciated his book that I got in one of my other classes, and that shaped me a lot. I think Katie, I don't want to say too many nice things about him, but his whole systems change with stuff that's like dead on point for me, really relevant to what I was doing. Sengi's fifth discipline influenced me too. It's something that I read when it first came out, and then I kind of forgot about it. And since I've gone back and looked at it, and it had a new relevance to me that I reappreciated. A book that I recommend everybody go read is The Age of Agile by Stephen Denning. That book will give you a real good appreciation of why agile methods and thinking is so important. And you will see the connection that it has to OD. And if my argument hasn't compelled you to want to be involved in it, I think that book will change your mind. Now, he doesn't say go do agile, go to ODC, bring them together. He kind of talks about it in like, hey, we're in this world that needs this kind of approach, and talks about a bunch of stuff in there I thought was incredible. It moved me in a way that a book hasn't moved me in a long time.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Final set of questions. If you were to boil it down to the essence, what is the mission of the field of OD?
I think it's primarily about teaching or enabling human systems to learn, adapt, and transform in ways that enhance their effectiveness, humanity, and perhaps their collective purpose. At its best, OD builds organizations capable of continuous learning and cultural evolution, and these are things that I really value for both my practice and the Agile ODC model that I've created.
So what would be the outcomes of that mission? What would be the dependent variables?
Well, increased adaptability and faster learning cycles, improved psychological safety, more effective decision making because it's now evidence-based. It's like a mini research project embedded in the way that you do things and you approach things. Greater alignment between strategy and execution. It's where I sit in the Agile scale as I connect strategy to the execution. And I think there's a gap missing there.
Wonderful. And what role can the field of OD take for the future?
Well, I think I've said part of that is, building this operating model needed to address complexity. We live in an incredibly complex world, and the way I was thinking about OD, I was challenged by some of my peers and mentors to, not to recognize that good OD is something that that does a lot of the things that I said, might be missing. But when you say good OD, that suggests that maybe there's some OD that's not so good, And so if I'm going to be really generous, let's say half OD is good. So what's the other half? Let's say the other half is not so good. Maybe we'll call it mediocre OD. So I don't know, but I think that if you give people a way of approaching this and embedding the principles, and this is something that Francis said to me here recently, but I also have this as a core thing inside me. I understand principles are really important. If you take principles and learn them, the idea is that you can apply those principles in any circumstance that you can't predict. Learning the tools and stuff are helpful, but the principles are what really matters. That's what drives you to make good decisions about things that you can't see in the future. So I think especially for like defense and government and enterprise environment, dealing with complexity is going to be really important. And Agile ODC really gives this field the modern engine for relevance and impact. So that's my future that I hope to bring to the field.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great questions.
Taking notes. All right. Well, everybody out there, if you can bring everybody in, Lisa, I want to say goodbye to everybody, see everybody's face that I can see. And just so glad to see everybody here, our friends. And like I said, we really have a nice community. And I just feel very grateful for each and all of you. It's good to see each of you. And Valerie and Brandy and Matt and Nick and Wasim and Al. So it's really good to see you, Al, and Janine and Teo as always, and Ryan and Rihanna and Brian and Jillian and Carol and Ken and Lisa is our producer, director. Thank you for all your good work to make this a smooth operating experience. And Gail, so glad that you've jumped in, and it's good to see you again this week. And Francis, as always, I'm just really glad to have you here. It's great to have your wisdom in, and you make Jackie's life a lot better too, just so you know. So it's really awesome. So everybody have a great day. Shawn, you're on a roll. So keep it up, keep rolling. And everybody, again, have a really great day. Bye for now.
Great job,
Take care.
Shawn.
Thank you, sir. It was fun.
Thank you, Shawn.
Francis, I love and miss you. Carol, I love and miss you too. Are you still in Mexico? Oh man.